But I want to bring something else to your attention because you remember how about a week and a day ago, Jim Comey was on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. Remember that? We talked about the interview. We played some of the clips during last week's show. And, Jim Comey was kind of taking this position of, okay, you know what? Inspector General was right. I was wrong. There was real sloppiness, as he put it, in the process. I mean, that's what they want to call it when they lie to the FISA court. They want to call it real sloppiness. If you or I lied to the FISA court or lied to the FBI, that's a criminal offense, and we're going to jail for a significant amount of time for that criminal offense. But when these guys do it, the guys in charge, they just say, that's just sloppiness. And remember, Comey said, that happened 7 layers below me. I can't be, as director of an organization of 38,000 people, I can't be in charge of every little investigation. Well, when we heard that, we knew that was a complete lie as well, because the entire Russia investigation was run out of the director and deputy director's offices, out of Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe's offices. And, of course, you can see that in the text messages that we have between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, you know what's interesting? The only reason apparently we've even got those text messages, because Peter Strzok's wife got a hold of them. His wife, who was pretty ticked off, by the way, about the affair he was conducting with his coworker, and that's how we got those text messages released, not because, the FBI was just being forthcoming with stuff. But one of the things that happened last week is Attorney General Bill Barr gave a number of interviews, one of them with Martha McCallum, that was pretty good. And I thought it was pretty stark the way that he laid out the fact that Jim Comey was lying in that interview on Fox News on Sunday. And, all I can say, because I hear a lot of back and forth on Attorney General Barr, I'm really looking, I have a lot of respect for the man. I believe he's done a great job. I'm looking forward to what's coming, but I also am a little bit nervous just because of some of the time delay and the way this is being run out, that, are they just once again running out the clock on us? And if you remember, there were a lot of people that thought that Attorney General Jeff Sessions was secretly looking into this stuff using that U.S. attorney out of Utah, John Huber. You remember that? And they said, wait till Huber, he's running essentially a secret investigation, and this is going to blow the whole thing open. Well, what it's turned out now is that John Huber said, I can't do anything, and I think this was a cop-out, by the way, but he said, I can't do anything because the Inspector General's investigating it, which is just not true. He could have himself done an investigation, but he chose not to. Maybe it was too hot politically, and he didn't want to touch it. But now we've got Attorney General Barr in there, and he's put John Durham, the U.S. attorney out of Connecticut, in charge of the investigation. And the things that they're saying make it sound to me like something is really going to happen. And I sure hope so, because we can't have any faith in these institutions if this stuff is just covered up. The American people, I think, by and large, those who are really paying attention to this, have lost faith. I know I have lost faith in the FBI and in the intelligence community for participating in this coup against our president.
Are we past the point of no return?
Well, I don't know. We've got to wait and see what happens here, but there's some noise being made that at least sounds positive. Now, let's listen to what Attorney General Barr had to say about Jim Comey's statements on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace.
He said, I was 7 steps removed from what was going on. The director doesn't get involved in these kinds of things, the actual investigation. Do you believe that?
No. I think that one of the problems with what happened was precisely that they pulled the investigation up to the executive floors, and it was run and bird-dogged by a very small group of very high-level officials. And the idea that this was 7 layers below him is simply not true.
Well, okay, there you have it. Now, we already knew that was the case, but it's amazing. You see, the media doesn't call, Chris Wallace didn't call Jim Comey on that. He wasn't ready to go with some of the information that showed that the investigation was being run out of the director and the deputy director's offices. He wasn't ready to go, for instance, with the text message between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page saying that the White House, which would be President Obama at that time, wants to be kept fully informed of everything we're doing. Now, who do you think goes up to brief the president? You think they send a low-level person, or does the director go and brief the president? Well, I'll tell you if you're not sure. It's the director. So Jim Comey knew exactly what was going on, and he was briefing President Obama on what was going on, and the people running the investigation knew about that. And yet the media doesn't report on any of this. And, of course, there is an effort to try and protect and cover for President Obama. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I mean, the truth of the matter is that you and I, any of us, we just don't have any power in this situation. So we've got to cross our fingers and hope against hope that this really is going to happen, that John Durham really is investigating all this. And by the way, he apparently is asking for the emails, call logs, and other documents from the CIA relating to John Brennan's role in this whole thing, because John Brennan is one of the central players, along with Jim Comey and James Clapper. They were the three that were running this operation. And, of course, if you listen to James Clapper, he'll point the finger at the president very quickly. He says it's hard for him to believe he could get in trouble for something that he was directed to do by the White House, right, as the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence. So you had the head of all of our intelligence agencies, the head of our CIA, John Brennan, and the head of our FBI, Jim Comey. You had all three of them working in concert under the direction of the president to conduct this investigation into Donald Trump, try to find something, some smoking gun that they could hang their hat on, some way to slander the president and the president-elect. And, of course, eventually, during his presidency, they then continued that investigation through the auspices of Bob Mueller and his investigation. Now, one of the things that kind of does disturb me about William Barr's statements is that he says there's no question Russia hacked our election. And we've heard that said over and over and over again. And remember, a lie told often enough becomes the truth. And that's what we're dealing with here, folks. It's hard to keep up with all the minutia and all the details. And there's a lot of stuff you probably don't even remember about this stuff. But the truth of the matter is that Russia did not hack the DNC servers, did not get the emails. That was most likely an inside job. And
okay, they didn't do it then, but they're really going to do it this November.
Exactly. Well, somebody who actually is in a position to know is William Benny. And we don't have time to cover all his biography, but he was probably one of the most decorated analysts in the history of the NSA. He created the Stellar Wind program that was used to spy on people all around the world, but not American citizens. And then after September 11th, 2001, the government made the decision to turn the Stellar Wind program on to the United States and on to U.S. citizens. And he resigned in protest and was a whistleblower, but didn't go public in the way that we see the quote-unquote whistleblowers now. He just resigned in protest and stated his objections. But let's listen just to a little bit of what he had to say about the Russian hacking, because he's really analyzed the data, and all appearances are that it was an inside job, i.e. that Seth Rich, well, I just lost, that's the problem with these. Let's see if I can get it back here, my place that I was trying to get to.
Suggesting the Russians made the hack. Well, we found the same 5 items published by WikiLeaks in the Podesta emails. And those items do not have the Russian fingerprints, which directly implies that Gustav II was inserting these into the files to make it look like the Russians did this hack. And it's very, and taking that into account with all the other evidence we had, like the download speeds from Gustav II were too fast, and they couldn't be managed by the web, and that the files he was putting together and saying that he actually hacked were in fact the 2 files he said he had were really one file, and that he was playing with the data and moving it into 2 different files to claim two hacks. So taking that into account with the fabrication of the Russian fingerprints, it leads us back to inferring that, in fact, the Marble framework out of the Vault 7 compromise of CIA hacking routines was a possible user of in this case.
So if you get what he's saying there, if you remember the Vault 7 release, it came out that the CIA had hacking technology that they could use to make it look like the Russians had done a hack, when in fact it was the CIA that had done the hack. And so what he's saying there is, I mean, if you're, and again, the details, I'm sorry, folks, there's so many details, it's hard to stay on top of it. But if you remember Guccifer and then Guccifer 2.0, Guccifer was a real guy. Guccifer 2.0, we don't really know who that was, but it's alleged to be the way that the Russians released the emails that they hacked from the DNC. And what William Benny is establishing there is that the reality was, because those documents are found other places and don't have the same fingerprints on them, the reality is that Guccifer 2.0 is probably a CIA job.
My head is spinning.
Isn't it? Well, all this was about creating a narrative, pushing it out there, and having enough evidence to support it so that people couldn't shoot it down completely. And, I mean, that is really, really sad. You know, I had some other stuff I was going to try to get to. We're running out of time here. We can't really get to it. But I was going to play that clip for you when Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, was testifying in Congress, and Gerald Nadler was asking him, and he testified. You remember that story about the Russian troll farms? They helped to hack our election. They put out memes that confused the American people and turned them against each other. You remember all that nonsense? Well, then it comes out that they spent in total less than $5,000 on the Google platform putting those ads out. Now, if they were able to spend $5,000 and affect the election, I mean, what about the $1 billion that Hillary Clinton had in her war chest? She needs to get some new advisors on how to spend that money, I guess. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.